Hello, good evening. I am Ajit Kumar Jha, the editor of the Public Global and the CEO of Power Pixar. And today we are starting with some good news because in the last, ever since Pahalgam happened, 22nd of April, the entire South Asia and the rest of the world had been plunged into a serious crisis because of the war between the two nuclear powered countries, India and Pakistan. So at least there is some good news, and the good news has come today, Saturday. India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. Now that is very, very important because we have been at war for the last few days, and this was brought about with the help of US President Donald Trump. In fact, US President Donald Trump announced today in a post on Truth Social after a long night of talks mediated by the US, I am pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire. Congratulations to both countries for using common sense and great intelligence. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Trump has posted this on Truth Social. The announcement comes after rising escalations between India and Pakistan after the terrorist attack in Pahalgam. So, today's video that I was planning to recap what was going to happen, what has happened during the last few days and what was going to happen, I will refocus on some other aspect, and that is the legitimacy crisis that Pakistan faces and why this crisis came about. I wanted to understand and share with our viewers the roots of the present crisis. Why is it that Pakistan, which appears as a democracy, but is actually a military dictatorship, it's ruled by a military junta from behind, and the story of that, the long-term history of that, ever since, in fact, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, his daughter Benazir Bhutto, and Imran Khan, all these popular leaders, they won elections, and they were either, in the case of, we know Imran Khan, he has been put in jail. In the case of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he was hanged. In the case of Benazir Bhutto, she was ousted out of the country. This is a deep crisis that Pakistan has seen in its history. Popular leaders elected, and yet they have been removed from power by the military junta at different stages of time. And I wanted to focus especially on Asim Munir, the present army general, who, if you remember, right before Pahalgam, a few days before that, he sort of gave a lecture in which he talked about the two-nation theory. In fact, when I was a student at in the US at UCLA, and I'm talking about the years 1990s. In 1992, a Pakistani drama film, wonderful film, I had watched it. It was called Immaculate Conception. It was directed by Jamil Delavi. And instead of telling you the story of the film at one point, someone makes a very important quip. He says that Pakistan is basically run by the three A's. Who are the three A's? Army, America, and Allah, meaning mullahs. So that appears to be constant throughout the history of Pakistan. it feigns democracy. They have elections, but the rulers are the army in cahoots with the mullahs or in cahoots with the various terrorist organizations that we are going to tell you about in this story. And America in the past used to direct it, use it against the Soviet forces in Afghanistan. At one time, Soviet Union had a massive presence in Afghanistan. So America used to use it. In fact, the defense minister of Pakistan recently in an interview to Sky TV pointed out that yes, Pakistan has instigated terrorist attacks on India, but at the behest of America. For a while, America had withdrawn and had become closer to India rather than Pakistan. But today, when a lot of analysts were saying that America has given up on this entire war or on Pakistan, President Trump has come back, played this great mediatory role. In fact, one can say that he is the hero of this ceasefire, and the villain of it is none other than the army general in Pakistan, Asim Munir, and I will tell you the entire story from that angle. When India and Pakistan face each other, it is not what one would call one democracy faces the other. It's not. India is a democracy. Pakistan is not. Pakistan is a dictatorship, actually. Although there have been elections, and 2024, they had an election the same time as India. But in India, the single largest party won. In Pakistan, the leader of the single largest party, Imran Khan, is in jail. So that is the basic difference between India and Pakistan. And who is running the shots there? Not the Prime Minister of Pakistan, not elected representatives, but the army. In this case, we are talking about Asim Munir. Many of you may not know the background of who is this person. So let me sort of tell you a little bit about him. If you remember, right before Pahalgam, or a few days before Pahalgam, he gave a lecture on what the two-nation theory. Suddenly, the army chief of Pakistan, Asif Munir, needed to talk about that. And that is the main event that began the entire crisis. So what I'm trying to tell you is that General Asif Munir, who, by the way, was at the funeral of, General Asif Munir, who basically, if you remember, he was the ISI chief, services intelligence chief, when Pakistan orchestrated the vicious Pulwama terror, in which we saw death of 40 personnel of the CRPF. If you remember, February 14th, 2019, it's the same person who was the notorious Pakistani spy agency, who was heading the notorious Pakistani spy agency. He, from 2019, 6 years from then, is now basically the de facto supremo boss of Pakistan. He basically calls the shots. And many of us don't realize that Pakistan, in fact, when I was a student in the US, there was a very interesting film made by a Pakistani, which I had gone to see. And it was quite an interesting movie, which had this punchline, which said that in Pakistan, everything is run by the AAA. And who were the AAA at that time? I am talking about the 1990s. Who was the AAA? Army, uh, America, because at that time the US used to back Pakistan. We are talking about the time when the Soviets had occupied Afghanistan. At that time, Pakistan used to be one of the, member of the CETO and other organizations, associations, and it used to be backed by the CIA. So Army, America, and in this case, they had used the word Allah, meaning mullahs. So Pakistan was basically, it's always been an alliance between these three. Now, the contrast these days is America is out. America is no more an ally of Pakistan. Instead, China has become a sort of big ally of Pakistan because China has done massive investments in Pakistan. But this combination of the mullahs, the what one would call radical clerics, in fact, worse than that, the Pakistani version of the Taliban and the Pakistani sort of terrorist groups in alliance with the ISI, in alliance with the army. That is what runs Pakistan. And mind you, not only, as I pointed out in 2024, Imran Khan's party, the PTI, that emerged as the most popular political force. The PTI, the full form of it is Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. That emerged as the single largest party. And yet, Imran was put inside jail, not allowed to become the most popular leader of Pakistan, ends up in jail and is not running the government. The government, as I said, although it is being run by Shawaz Sharif and others, who kind of are in cahoots with the army, because if you are a civilian leader in Pakistan and you don't have a truck with the army, then you are kicked out or you're put in jail. And in Pakistan, there is a long tradition of that. If you remember, after the Shimla Agreement, 1971, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had come. And what happened to him? Most of you know that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he was the leader of, if you remember, the PPP, Pakistan's People's Party, and he was popularly elected, but he was hanged. Later on, his daughter, Benazir Bhutto, sort of became the leader of PPP. She and her rival, Nawaz Sharif, for 10 years almost, they kind of ran the government, but the army was always behind. And there was a musical chair between her and Nawaz Sharif. But then she was outmaneuvered as well. And if you remember, by October 1999, General Pervez Musharraf exiled both Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif and came back to power. Then in the 2018 elections, finally, later on the PPP won, and in the meanwhile, Imran had sort of emerged. In fact, around 2011, Imran's PTI had emerged, and as the story goes, because Imran had some kind of understanding with some sort of forces inside the army. So what happened is he was seen as a threat to Asim Munir. In fact, he had brought Asim Munir, later on sacked him, and the entire sort of thing in between caused a massive rift between Imran on one side, a popularly elected leader. Remember Imran Khan, a great international cricketer, studied at Oxford, at one time very popular in India, and Asim Munir, who is one of the most hated guys in Pakistan. In fact, this crisis of legitimacy, the fact that a popularly elected guy is in jail, and the leaders who are ruling Pakistan, they are basically de facto rulers. They are not de jure in that sense. They are not the most popular leader. And from behind, the entire show is being run by, as I pointed out, the army under the guise of Asim Munir. That has created what most analysts who understand Pakistan say a crisis of legitimacy. I do not want to go into the details of academic details of this concept, but basically, there is a political crisis, deep factionalism. Pakistan, you know, is a very narrow society, a very thin elite, most of who control huge amounts of land and have huge amounts of money. They basically run, it's a very semi-feudal kind of state, and they are the ones running Pakistan, and they needed a war with India. They needed to provoke India. They needed this two nation theory was suddenly resurfaced. Why? Because they wanted to create a Hindu versus Muslim kind of a narrative. And if you remember in Pahalgam, for the first time, in the killing of 26 tourists, they were asked what their religion was. They were asked to read the Kalma, and they were stripped, and all these heinous acts were done in order to bring back this massive, what one would call a sectarian communal divide between the two religions. Why? Because it helps Munir to come back and gain a certain legitimacy, because there is a serious crisis there. Not only is there as I pointed out, a deep, serious crisis of legitimacy, on top of that, there is also a serious economic crisis going on in Pakistan. Pakistan, at one time, again, when I was a student, economists like Gustav Papanek used to point out Pakistan's massive growth rate, because it was being pushed those days by the US. So Pakistan used to have a higher growth rate than India. Its per capita used to be higher than India. Today, Pakistan is at the bottom of the ladder. Pakistan has had since 1958, it has had 25 bailouts by the International Monetary Fund. Pakistan, in fact, it keeps taking loans to pay previous loans. The economic crisis is so bad, but yet it ends up spending all the loans it gets from IMF, from the World Bank, other agencies. All the loans it gets, especially from the IMF, it spends on defense, and that leads to Pakistan entering into peculiar conflictual situation as the present one. At the same time, there is massive corruption both in the army and among the politicians. As I pointed out, the nature of the elite is very narrow. And let me just give you some figures. According to the SIPRI, Pakistan spent $10 billion, which is 2.6% of its GDP on defense in 2024. And this is despite the fact that Pakistan's external debt is over $130 billion. Think of it. Pakistan's external debt is $130 billion, but its forex reserves is a mere $15 billion, which is hardly 3 months of import. So Pakistan is on the brink of an economic crisis. As I pointed out, it is having a legitimacy crisis because its most popular leader in the 2024 elections is in jail. The other political leaders at this moment, Nawaz Sharif's brother, who is the prime minister, hardly has much power. He's not a very inspiring leader, unlike his brother Nawaz Sharif. And he's basically what one would call run. He's become a mouthpiece of the army. And the army, as I pointed out, is run by Asif Munir, and he is the one instigating the entire thing into a war so that the army ends up getting legitimacy. Asif Munir ends up becoming the hero, which he is not. So the entire war in this case, I would point out, started with Pahalgam, which in fact some of the reports have come that Pakistan had almost a year before this April ordered detailed pictures of Pahalgam from an American organization. In a later video, I'll talk about it in details because time is running out. And so the whole thing was pre-planned, perpetrated by the Pakistani army. And if you remember, Asim Munir's that famous two-nation theory lecture, which started the entire thing, it created a controversy. People in India didn't realize what was happening. Before that, Pahalgam took place. Now, one must admit that Pahalgam, on our own part, is a kind of failure of intelligence, coming as it does right after Siasi and some of the other sort of killings in which, if you remember, a busload of people were killed in Siasi in Jammu. Before that, there were several killings in Jammu. None of these perpetrators of this crime, either Siasi or Pahalgam or before that, have been arrested yet. So India decided that there was no way out except only way out was to strike at the hubs of terror in Pakistan. There are some estimates go that there are almost 21 of those. India targeted initially in a very, very precise manner 9 of those. But then, of course, Pakistan retorted back by saying that civilians have been killed, that we have shot your planes, etc., etc. And now we know, as things are unfolding, that in the last couple of days, Pakistan has been shelling all the border states. Several cities have been, Pakistani army has attacked, through mortar, through drones, even through missiles, and especially the border towns like Jammu, even Chandigarh, the entire of J&K, all of them have been attacked. People have been moved from there because the entire place, the energy, the power has been cut out. In fact, it's quite a serious situation. And the escalation is going on by the Pakistani side. India is still trying to restrain itself because as Hasib Drabu, one of our very good analysts, wrote in an article a couple of days ago in the Indian Express, he pointed out that for the first time, the fight between India and Pakistan is not on the issue of Kashmir. It is clearly on the issue of war against terror. And that is why not only when India attacked those 9 places, when it struck them, those were not only in Muzaffarabad and other areas of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, but also in Bahawalpur, Muridki, and others nearer Lahore, because those were the centers. Those are identified as centers of we know the famous Lashkar-e-Toiba and other organizations. Now, the war is still continuing. I'd rather you listen to the army's version of it, the Indian Army's version of it. They have their spokesperson. So it's better to follow them. since we have no access. I'm not on the war front. We have no access to details. But let me point out, we must understand our enemy. Our enemy is just not a neighboring state, not simply an Islamic state. It is worse. The deep state of Pakistan, as I pointed out, is technically a military junta. Um, you know, so that is something we need to understand. It is being run by the army. In fact, political scientists call it Strattocracy. Stratos is from the Greek word army. So we have some kind of veneer of democracy, but essentially it's a democracy, the world's largest democracy, India, versus a military junta, versus a strattocracy in Pakistan. And we need to understand the nature of that, because our aim should be to form some kind, in the long run, help Pakistan restore democracy. Because if we don't, then we continue to face a military junta in the future whose only aim is to instigate all kinds of terrorist actions. This entire thing has a long history, which I'll go in another video in the future. But the ISI, when it was in crisis in the past, it built this relationship with these various outfits like the Lashkar-e-Toiba, like others, and that continues to this day. So what happens, as I pointed out, that popular movie which talks about Pakistan run by the 3 A's, America is out, but these two others, the army and the mullahs, in this case, the radical Islamists, they have an alliance. And each time the army feels threatened, what it does is it ends up emerging either through a crisis, like it has pushed the world into this entire crisis which started in Pahalgam, and now this war going on. It tries to bounce back to power. It tries to sort of get all the resources to be spent on defense. And who are the sufferers? The people of Pakistan. So this is a serious problem we need to understand. And in the future, we need not only a war to end this crisis, but diplomatic channels. What it will be, we will talk about as the crisis unfolds. But it is something very, very serious. The world needs to listen and understand that we are dealing with dangerous army generals, the villain of which is Asim Munir. Thank you very much.